You gotta cut the fat on your diet. You gotta get on that bike. You need energy. Keto, keto, keto. Fails every time. No energy.
He's just busting out truth bombs. Too much fat in the diet can also impede glucose metabolism.
It's that carb phobia is ludicrous. And then they don't show pure sugar. They're showing like donuts and fat-filled.
They will have 4 slices of pizza and then judge you for having 4 bananas without seeing the irony, right?
People make these assumptions based off of what they've heard in the media. But what the science is saying, glucose, carbohydrates give energy.
It just burns hotter. It's giving them the will to live.
Hey everybody, welcome to Plant-Based News with Sarah and Shabnam.
Hi there.
And I was excited to share with them a snippet of a video I've recently seen called The Sugar Diet Will Get You Ripped, featuring Cole Robinson. So Cole Robinson is the guest, and the host of the YouTube channel is a guy called Mark Bell. And what's really interesting about Mark Bell is not only is he a professional powerlifter, entrepreneur, and fitness personality, but he's also low carb. And as we'll see in this video, Cole Robinson, who's a bit of a passionate personality, is against that low carb kind of keto message. So I haven't seen the whole video, so let's just go into the clips.
You gotta cut the fat on your diet. You gotta get on that bike. You need energy. Just drinking caffeine, get the off it, okay? You need perfect sleep. And remember, sugar in the absence of fat is healthy, will get you shredded. There's no top-level cardio athletes that are doing any sort of duration of time that aren't just pounding carbohydrates. See, people underestimate the value of energy for sustainability in a weight loss diet. Energy is king.
So I think here he's doing an impression of this YouTuber called Harley Johnstone, this guy called Duran Ryder. But as we'll see in this video, he holds most of the same positions.
These people that are losing weight, I'm getting crazy results with these menopausal women. Like, these women are getting destroyed by that low-carb diet. And that's when it really started. I had some menopausal women getting a hold of me, and they would come to me because they were scared of sugar. And they're like, cool, I want to learn how to fast or do a strict, like, ketogenic diet. And I just almost couldn't even look them in the face because I just knew that it fails every time. And it just destroys, it screws their thyroid function up, and then they have no I better watch my cussing on here. It won't get monetized when you post it.
You could be your normal self. I encourage you, because that's
so basically their thyroid function gets completely over time, and then they'll stall on the weight loss, and they have no energy, and then they're relying on a stupid amount of caffeine just to drag their ass through the day.
I'm so intrigued to see what Shabnam says because
he's got quite a personality. I mean, let's take that aside. But aside from that, like, he's just busting out truth bombs that people probably don't like. And when we think about things like the ketogenic diet, like what sustains energy, glucose is the energy of the cell. It's the fuel in your car. You need it. And when you don't have it, we have gluconeogenesis, where we create glucose molecules from non-glucose sources such as fat, right? And protein. Gluconeogenesis, that happens. But this is intensity and time dependent, meaning that it takes a lot of time to get to the point to do this. And it also takes a lot of energy to do this. When you are in fat or lipid oxidation, fat metabolism, protein metabolism, you don't work at high levels of energy. You don't work at high bouts. And so when you start to see people that are on ketogenic diets, they're also on copious amounts of caffeine because that's how they get through their day. You need an additional stimulant to function because you just don't have the requisite energy to function at a high level. And that's what we're talking about. You can still function, you can get through your day, but you'll drag, right? And you won't have the kind of focus because you need glucose.
I was doing the pop because I'm metabolically healthy. When I was drinking that pop, I would have about 300 calories of high fructose corn syrup. My sugars would go up to maybe 5.8 millimoles per liter. So whatever that is times about 18 and milligrams per deciliter. And within an hour and less, I would be right back down to like 4.2, 4.3. Like that's how fast I'd recover. But this is where people don't understand. Like a lot of these zero carb communities, and they're always it's that carb phobia is ludicrous. And then they don't show pure sugar. They're showing like donuts and fat filled.
I mean, it is true what he's saying, and I'll put it out there. I really like this guy because, like, what I found about the plant-based community, I know this guy isn't plant-based, he's not vegan, but he's promoting a similar kind of message to kind of Dean Ornish or Dr. Neil Bernard and these kind of people, but in a kind of more useful, energetic, triathlete kind of way. He's just really owning it. He's just being really authentic.
For insulin resistance in the media, sugar has become the main issue, like the main proponent. But what we see in the research literature is that high-fat diets, particularly saturated fat, also lead to insulin resistance through what we call dyslipidemia, or having these abnormal lipid levels. This plays a huge role in type 2 diabetes. And so this is what I need people to remember. It is just not one macronutrient that causes an issue here. Too much fat in the diet can also impede glucose metabolism. It's going to get very hard to get that glucose into the muscle cell because it's competing with all these fat cells. And so that's what we see. The less body fat someone has, the better they can regulate their blood sugar.
And the really interesting thing here is the host of the channel, which he's being interviewed on, is, I think, low carb. And so this is why it's a really interesting conversation, right? Because this guy is trying to bring up a truth in his mind, which we agree with, which is that it's not about going keto. It's not about going low carb. You can actually consume carbohydrates. Obviously, he's quite extreme about it. He's probably promoting, refined sugar. But I think, there's a methodology behind his madness. Let's go to the next clip.
That's what I'm trying to get through to people. That as soon as you start having that sugar, it, like I say, it, like there's people I help. I don't know, like I've helped people that are tried to help them that are 500, 600, 700 pounds, and they just have no energy. So how do you give the most energy you can possibly give somebody? Possibly is pure sugar. It just burns hotter. If I could give you 300 calories for breakfast, and you could have either fat, pure fat, 300 calories of olive oil, or 300 calories of protein, or 300 calories of fat mixed with protein, so, a regular low-carb diet, or 300 calories of pure sugar, that pure sugar will make you kick.
So I think what he's saying, or this is my interpretation from it, right? He's saying that refined foods are bad, but we live in a world where refined sugar is the most demonized processed food. And what he's saying is actually refined sugar is the best processed food compared to the other processed foods like added salt and added oil, right?
Yes, that's exactly how I take it, is that he's like, let's just imagine, like, if I were to give you Cocoa Puffs for breakfast compared to a donut, the impact of the Cocoa Puffs in itself, not combining that with, say, dairy milk, the impact of Cocoa Puffs itself would have a greater metabolic response for energy over time than saying the donut. The donut with sugar, but also laden with high amounts of saturated fat. Remember, fat also impedes digestion. So then sugar entering the muscle cell takes a significant longer amount of time to digest. Okay. So what we start to see is a quick amount of energy because we get it through the blood glucose, like the sugar, but then an immediate crash. Whereas if we're consuming that high sugar cereal that doesn't have high amounts of fat in it, right? We don't see that kind of impact. I don't think people should be eating these types of processed foods. Please, let me just emphasize. Yeah. But I would choose that over the other.
I mean, there was this thing called the rice diet in the 1930s by Dr. Walter Kempner at Duke University. And this diet, right, so for type 2 diabetics, it was made up of white rice, a little bit of added sugar, fruit, and basically very, very limited fat, but carbohydrate rich. And a lot of it was white rice or processed carbohydrate. A lot of them actually improved their diabetes, or even in some cases went into remission, right? So this is, people don't like to bring that up because it's obviously processed carbs, but it shows what you're saying, Shabnam, when you strip away the the fat. That's where you get the real benefit. Now, obviously, a whole food plant-based diet that's naturally low in fat is the best, but you still get benefits compared to the standard American diet if you just go low fat with processed carbs, right?
I mean, you're seeing it in the research. The problem is rice is cheap, fruit is cheap, it's not subsidized, there's no money in it. It's just a lose-lose for an economy if you're about making people healthier. And that's what I need people to see. Like, you look at these blue zones, as Sarah was saying, right? What are their main sources of foods? Rice. So I just find it fascinating when we are physically seeing these outcomes in other cultures, but yet we refuse to make those adjustments to ours. These Asian cultures, and I think we see this with you see Colin Campbell's with the China study, the reason why we start to see their metabolic pathways change, the way that they are, living with type 2 diabetes, obesity, chronic diseases, is because they are now adapting the standard American diet, not their traditional Asian diet. Does that make sense? So I think that capitalism has a really big play in the way we believe science.
What, because it's industry funded?
Absolutely. Now, if people could make money off of rice the way that they did with meat.
Yeah.
He was obviously a vegan, right? And that really muffles the message. Because not every vegan's created equally either. Like, these vegans that are eating like a pile of nuts and just greens and just this low carb vegan diet, that diet is trash. Now, these vegans that are eating a low fat, high carb diet and pounding in the carbs, that diet is almost good. Except it's missing that little bit of lean meat. Now, I will give this one young guy a shout out. You probably know who he is. Alex Leonidas. So he's a young guy. He's a 100% natural guy. He's strong, and he did his last cut on a vegan diet. So like, he knows how to mix and match those proteins, and he did a low fat, high carb vegan diet. And he got ripped, and he was strong as hell on it. And there is people that pull that vegan diet off, if you're taking the supplementation. But where I come in is like, I'm getting quite a bit of, like, I got quite a few vegan fans, because like, specifically the low fat, high carb vegans, because I'm promoting basically the same macros as them, but I'm still saying lean meat is good. And that's where we'll never completely agree. But that's where, that's where that's where his message would get muddled, like, because he was a vegan so soon, because there's so much politics and diet now. As soon as you say you're a vegan, people are like, you're an idiot, you're a vegan. And that's the problem, where I'm not a vegan, but I'm promoting those similar macros, right?
Is he talking about John McDougall?
He said McDonald, but I think he meant...
Yeah, I think that's who he means. If you
McDonald's.
McDonald.
What he was basically saying, he's right. The only difference that he's promoting here is, instead of saying eat lean meat, we're saying eat lean protein.
Yes.
Tofu, tempeh, seitan, the options are endless. And so I think that we do share a very similar message here, because he's talking about macronutrient and micronutrient profile. And I think those are very important components to talk about when we want to talk about performance outcomes.
So I just want to bring up a comment under this video. Dr. McDougall's starch solution is pretty much like what he's talking about here. I've been on McDougall's plan for about 2 years and I feel better than ever. Low protein, no fat, high carbs. Obviously, this person doesn't literally mean no fat. They just mean limited fat, right?
When we're talking about acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges, we're talking about having fat allocations anywhere between 20 and 35%, protein between 10 to 35% of your total calories, and then carbohydrates anywhere between 45 to 65%. Low fat could be something that's less than 10%. Like, low protein could be something less than 20% in your diet. So it doesn't mean that it's completely gone. It's eliminated. It's just less than what's required or recommended.
Also, a comment says, this guy is the next Freely the Banana Girl. Very true.
Do you know her?
I don't. I was like, is Freely the Banana Girl an English person?
She's from Australia, I think.
You were very familiar with her ways back in the day, right, Klaus?
Yeah, like, so when I started Plant Based Season doing videos and getting passionate about whole food plant-based, she was one of the main vloggers, and she would promote this idea of raw till 4. So lots of fruit in the day and then like a starch-based dinner.
Oh, I love that. I completely recommend that. And then, intermittent fasting, right? Not eating 12, 16 hours and then starting that cycle all over again.
Shabnam, do you find that hard to do when you're doing your like juice cleanses or your fruitarian spells? Do you find it, because I find it really tricky whenever I'm trying to have loads of fruit, I can't just stuff it in the day. I was like eating late and I'm waking up and I want to eat straight away in the morning.
No, I like to start my day with like some type of melon first. Usually you should have melons on an empty stomach, watermelon, cantaloupe, that kind of thing. After I consume that, probably 30 minutes later, I'll have mixed fruit or whether a smoothie. I consume only fruit until 12 p.m. And then I start shifting into other vegetables between 12 and 4, and then more starchy between 4 and 8.
Wow.
Very interesting. Okay.
And that's usually traditionally how I work when I'm at home. And I think that if more people ate this way, they'd have less issues. But I don't do it, this is the 80-20% rule, right? Like 80% of the time, this is how I like to live my life. 20% of the time, there's no way I'm going to have that approach, particularly when traveling for work, right? Those last 3 weeks, this lifestyle completely went out the door. But guess what? I haven't slept efficiently since. And over those 3 weeks, terrible sleep. So what I see is that my lifestyle, my approaches when I go to bed early, when I have a high fruit, high vegetable diet, starches later in the day, I start my day with exercise, I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. When I don't have those behaviors, I sleep 4 to 5 hours a night, and it's very restless sleep.
I'd love to see like a day of eating, of like what you eat. Like I'd love to actually just see it either written down or in a video format so I can be like, okay, that's what you actually eat.
The book is coming, folks. The
Yay!
book is coming.
The melon breakfast. I need to see that.
Definitely seen that where if your metabolism's working good, and but like I say, if you're on a low carb diet too long and you're really never really testing your body with that sugar, you will screw up your insulin sensitivity for sure. There's no doubt. And if you actually took an oral glucose tolerance test, you can see it. And that's why a lot of people, when they use the word "I'm carb sensitive," it's because of that. Because then they actually kind of are, but it ain't. It's not genetic. It's because they're basically type 2 diabetic.
He's just so passionate. I love it.
Yeah, this guy's wild. Listen, when you remove something from your diet and then you introduce it back in, it's going to have a response that it's not familiar with. And that's basically what he's saying. But oftentimes when we say to people, if you have a banana mixed with a subacid fruit, say like strawberries, it reduces the glucose spike you can get from the banana itself. The combination of the food, in addition to having fiber, mitigates the insulin response. So there's so much chemistry involved in nutrition and dietetics. That's why I'm like, if you find an influencer you like, please make sure they have a background in chemistry.
The problem is you can get people from the other side saying the same thing, though. This is the really challenging thing, because it's almost like you can use that, whatever your credentials are, to suit your particular path, even if that's carnivore.
What terrifies me is when we're looking at the longitudinal evidence of these particular diets, 10, 20 years, what are we seeing the impacts are of eating a high fat, particularly saturated fat diet? Well, we see cardiovascular disease. We see metabolic disease. We see metabolic dysfunction.
Is that what you would say to the Mandy who's commented, I cannot eat sugar carbs for many reasons. It causes crippling migraine and dark room depression. Carnivore for me to stay stable mentally. Are you saying like in the short term she's getting what she's getting, but in the long term, the data shows that health will suffer?
I think, again, I would be like, great. Well, we need to have a deeper dive into what you're actually eating and when you're eating it. how you're sleeping. We have to take a look at multiple factors and variables to ensure that it's just the diet. Does that make sense? Because she could be eating terribly high sugary things like Nerds candy, Skittles. You see what I'm saying? And of course, we're going to have this kind of response. There's no nutrient quality involved in that. But it's always funny because, like, I always find it hilarious where somebody's like, you're going to get fat off of eating all those bananas.
Energy is king. Okay, energy is king, and that's where I'll win the argument every time. Because the energy is so high that these people that's giving them the will to live, I'll always get them to have that big sugar hit in the morning because the first priority one, I want to get them off the caffeine. I want them to have crazy natural energy in the morning from the carbs, specifically sugar, so specifically fructose. Like, what, everybody's scared to death. It's nuts.
They will have 4 slices of pizza and then judge you for having 4 bananas without seeing the irony, right?
Without realizing that your 4 slices of pizza have significantly more carbohydrate density than my 4 bananas do. And on top of that, the loads of saturated fat laden in those pizzas are really what's impacting your metabolic system. But if I'm just going to have it in a banana, which has lots of fiber, lots of vitamins, lots of minerals, lots of other nutrients, I'll stop eating when I'm no longer hungry because my brain knows to stop because I have nutrient dense food. I have filled up on my potassium. I've filled up on the things that I want. So I find it very interesting when people make these assumptions based off of what they've heard in the media. But what the science is saying, glucose, carbohydrates give energy. Fiber is a big part of this micronutrition, not just the macronutrition, because we get so focused on carbs, fats, and proteins that we forget about the vitamins, the minerals, the water content, right?
Somebody else said, I would like to offer some constructive feedback. It would be beneficial to remove this video and aggressively edit the content to convey a clearer message. Currently, your presentation is perceived as self-centered.
Listen, I guess shoot the messenger and not the message. I mean, I guess that's his problem, right? Like, he doesn't like how the message is portrayed. And I think that's why you'll find your influencers that you love, right? That's why we love Ed Winters. We love the way he portrays the message. And I think a lot of us in the vegan space or in the plant-based space idolize the way that he shares a story, the way he connects with his community. And I feel like he's like the ahimsa, the goal, like the Buddhist, the achievement in terms of delivery. But not everybody can be Ed Winters, right? And not everybody likes Ed Winters. Some people like this spicy little nugget. I love him. I'm like, shoot him out of a cannon into my parents' front yard because they won't know what to do with him.
You know, people just always want to hear about keto, you know, and that's why I took a pretty big risk starting to pump sugar. Because it's like people, I have a lot of people that follow me for years that are like, this guy's on crack, right? Tell people to eat table sugar. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, like, he's just fabulous.
Who's the health equivalent of Ed Winters?
I love Mike the Vegan. You know who I also like? I love Simon Hill.
Yes.
He floors me every time. You know, but I also feel the same way about like Dr. Neil Bernard and Dr. Michael Clapper, like to have such grace in when they speak. You know, I'm sure they've dealt with a lot of aggressive stakeholders in their lifetime. And to come out on this end of the spectrum, it really gives me hope, I think.
Yeah.
get people off so much meds. And I think a lot of this ADHD bullshit, truthfully, is because there's too much fat in that diet and it makes kids' sugars yo-yo. When you knock the fat out, there is no sugar crash. Like, a sugar crash does not exist when the fat is out of that diet and your insulin sensitivity is good.
I mean, I don't know about ADHD, but what I do know is the high fat, high sugar causes type 2 diabetes. It exacerbates dementia, prostate cancer, heart disease. There's so many different diseases. So it wouldn't be a coincidence if a high fat, high carb diet and together in unison also exacerbates ADHD. But I don't know anything about ADHD, so I want to be careful.
Yeah, I'm not as well versed, but what I do know is that also physical activity plays a huge role. in mitigating, cognitive issues and behavioral issues. And so I think what we see a trend in the research, Klaus, is to say that our nutrition quality has diminished over time. We're getting a lot less whole food, plant-based nutrition for our general population. And we're also decreasing adequate levels of daily physical activity. And those two variables combined will have reverberating effects, not only on our cognition, on our mental health, but also on our physical health.
Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily right to say that it's the food that causes it in children, because I don't think that's true. I think it's a neurodiversity that is from birth. But I think you are right in that what you eat and like how much exercise you're doing can definitely impact how it presents and the symptoms of it, and like trying to like mitigate against it, I suppose.
I don't think with anything it is one specific cause. You can be someone who eats well, who's plant-based, who exercises, who reads, who has a social structure, and then guess what? Still has ADHD.
Yeah,
so that's what I'm saying. Multifactorial, environmental, genetic. There's so many things that come into play. Determining why may not be the main issue here. It's now like, how can we manage this more effectively? And hopefully with a less dependency on medication, right? But that's not always the case for most people. Some people need medical intervention. That's why medicine exists, folks. Like, it's here to help, right? But we also know it can be abused. So you find yourself a practitioner that lays all the factors out for you and says, if you can do this and this and this, and then you add this little medication in, you probably will need to be on the lower dosage. But if we can manage all of these factors together, I think the outcome will be much better.
Walter Kempner, and he was basically reversing type 2 diabetes and kidney disease and all sorts of health issues in like from about 1939 to like 1950 with pure sugar. He was putting people on orange juice or juice, table sugar, and rice. Because that's what gets that blood sugar response, that's what gets that insulin response working properly. And once you're working properly, because you've been doing a lot of low carb dieting, a lot of fasting yourself, I wouldn't be surprised if you're insulin resistant to a point. Give it a couple weeks, and it's mind blowing like how fast you start cutting. You can literally reverse type 2 diabetes with sugar water, straight up. You can reverse type 2 diabetes 100% of the time, making people fast on sugar water.
I know that Ray Peat talked about that before. And then also, I think I've heard some people, and these are really good scientists. I just cannot remember who I heard talking about this, but they said if diabetes came along today, they would call it more of a lipid problem than a sugar problem. And that's fascinating.
Fascinating and true. There's a really interesting guy, but I'm going to look into some of his protocols and what he recommends more. Being honest, I've never seen him before. I don't really know what he recommends. Probably like a lot of these passionate online people, there's a lot of truth, but a little bit of dodgy stuff on the side. So I haven't looked into the snake diet or whatever we said it was that he recommends. But yeah, maybe in another video we can look into it. But I'm sure, please don't watch this video and then follow him, because we haven't looked at all the other stuff he recommends.
In terms of other things that he may be selling, be careful of things like snake oils and pills and drinks, because capitalism, folks.
Shabnam, what we're all trying to say is one word: disclaimer.
Yeah.
That's it.